It was just after 9 on a sticky July night when Evelyn Carter felt something sharp twist deep in her chest. Not like her usual heartburn, heavier, slower, like someone pressing down with a full hand. She was sitting in her living room, fan humming, TV murmuring the evening news. When the ache spread down her left arm, she knew it wasn't just indigestion. She tried to stand. Her legs felt weak. "Okay, Evelyn," she told herself, "don't panic, just call." She picked up her phone and dialed 911, the same number she taught her fifth graders to memorize 30 years ago. "911, what's your emergency?" a calm voice asked. Evelyn's tone was steady, the teacher's tone that had calmed classrooms full of rowdy children. "Ma'am, I think I might be having a heart problem," she said. "I'm short of breath. My chest hurts." The operator replied, "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Can you unlock your door for the paramedics?" "Yes, it's open. I live at 222 Hamilton." "All right," the operator said. "Help is on the way. Try to stay calm." Evelyn thanked her quietly and set the phone on the table beside her. She leaned back, breathing slow. The pain pulsed, deep and dull now. She waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. No sirens, no flashing lights through the window, just the hum of her old fan and the steady tick of the wall clock. Evelyn called again. A different operator answered this time. "Yes, ma'am, I called earlier," Evelyn said. "I think I'm having a heart issue. No one's come yet." The woman hesitated. "Hold, please." Evelyn waited, listening to silence. When the operator came back, her voice had changed, polite but distant. "Ma'am, our system shows your call as non-emergency. You can visit your nearest urgent care if you're still experiencing discomfort." "Non-emergency?" Evelyn repeated. "I told her my chest hurt." "Yes, ma'am, but the record lists you as stable." "Stable?" Evelyn whispered. "I can barely breathe." The line went quiet again. Across the street, her neighbor, Mr. Lewis, noticed her porch light flicker twice, her signal for help. He rushed over, found her slumped on the couch, sweating and pale. "Miss Evelyn," he said, grabbing his phone, "you call 911? They said I'm stable." Lewis didn't wait. He helped her into his car, driving as fast as his old Buick could manage. At the emergency room, nurses moved quickly, hooking up monitors and oxygen tubes. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. The doctor frowned. "You're lucky you got here when you did, Mrs. Carter." She tried to smile. Didn't feel lucky waiting. An hour later, her daughter Monica arrived from her apartment across town, still in scrubs from her nursing shift. "Mama, what happened?" "They never came," Evelyn said softly. "What do you mean they never came?" "I called twice. They said I wasn't an emergency." Monica's eyes widened. "You said chest pain?" "Yes." "And they said you were stable?" Evelyn nodded. Monica took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Mama, that's not how triage works. If you say chest pain, they have to come." "Well," Evelyn said quietly, "I guess the rules changed." The next morning, Monica visited the front desk at the ER. "I need to see the dispatch log from my mother's call last night," she told the clerk. After a few minutes, the woman handed her a printout. At the top, under response priority, it read, "Category 4, non-urgent." And in smaller letters, "Low confidence distress signal. Caller tone consistent with low risk." Monica stared at the words. "Low risk?" she whispered. "She nearly died." The nurse beside her said softly, "That's the new AI system. It scores calls by tone and keywords. If you sound calm, it assumes you're fine." Monica looked up sharply. "So if she'd screamed, they'd have come?" The nurse didn't answer. That evening, back home, Evelyn sat in her armchair, blanket draped over her legs. Her voice was thin but steady. I wasn't trying to be brave, she said. I was just trying not to make a fuss. They always say don't panic. Monica knelt beside her. You did everything right, Mama. The system's what's wrong. Evelyn smiled faintly. Funny thing, though, when I was younger, I used to tell my students, stay calm in an emergency. Now that calm almost cost me my life. When Evelyn Carter called for help, the system didn't hear urgency. It heard composure. Her voice, shaped by decades of patience and restraint, was translated into apathy by a machine that couldn't tell fear from control. The call didn't fail because of silence. It failed because someone decided certain voices don't sound like emergencies. Next, her daughter Monica begins to uncover how the new AI triage software predicts urgency and why entire zip codes like her mother's are quietly flagged as low priority. The morning after Evelyn's hospital stay, her daughter Monica sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and her laptop open, scrolling through articles about the county's new emergency dispatch system. Every headline sounded the same. AI reduces 911 response time by 22%. Smarter dispatch, faster help. And then, buried deep in a small sidebar, some communities report longer wait times. She clicked. The article said the system, called Pulse Point AI, was meant to save lives by sorting calls more efficiently. Instead of a person deciding what was urgent, the algorithm analyzed keywords, tone, location, and history of previous calls. To the computer, urgency wasn't just what you said, it was how you sounded. If you sounded calm, or if your address had a history of false alarms, your call automatically dropped to the bottom of the list. Monica read that line twice. False alarms, she muttered. You mean poor neighborhoods. She called the dispatch office directly. A man answered, voice weary but polite. This is Monica Carter, she said. My mother called 911 for chest pain last night. She waited 40 minutes. I want to know why her call was marked non-emergency. The man hesitated. Ma'am, if the system flagged it, it's likely because the AI didn't detect panic. Didn't detect panic? She said slowly. She said her chest hurt. Yes, but tone analysis weighs heavily. If the caller sounds composed, it's treated as low risk. The system's trained to prioritize distress patterns. Monica's voice hardened. So if you're calm, you don't get help? He sighed. I know how that sounds, but it saved us time. A lot of people exaggerate, you know. The AI filters that out. Filters out? Monica repeated. My mother almost died, and you're talking about filters? Later that day, she visited the county's emergency services headquarters. The office buzzed with computer screens and dispatchers wearing headsets. In the center of the room, a large monitor displayed a digital map of the city, blinking dots of color, red for high priority, yellow for moderate, blue for low. Evelyn's neighborhood, South Hamilton, was a sea of blue. The upper suburbs north of the highway glowed red and orange. Monica turned to the tech officer giving the tour. Why is my mother's area all blue? He glanced at the screen. That's just the algorithm waiting. Low response zones. Low response, she repeated. Meaning what? It's based on call reliability. Some zip codes have higher rates of false reports or delayed confirmations, so the system adjusts. She folded her arms. And those zip codes happen to look like mine, right? He paused. Ma'am, the AI doesn't see race. Monica stared at him. Then explain why it keeps acting like it does. That evening, Monica pulled up the public data reports for PulsePoint. They showed performance metrics by district. Northfield, mostly white, upper income, average response time 6 minutes. South Hamilton, mostly black, low income, average response time 22 minutes. Delta Park, mixed income, 14 minutes. She felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just her mother. The system was slower everywhere people like her lived. When Evelyn came into the kitchen, Monica turned the laptop toward her. Mama, look at this. They called your neighborhood low reliability. Evelyn frowned. Low reliability? For what? Existing? Monica's eyes watered. It's all data to them, Mama. They don't see people, just patterns. Evelyn's voice softened. And you know what the problem with patterns is, baby? They hide the truth in averages. The next morning, Monica met with an old friend from college who now worked in data science. He looked over the reports and shook his head. These models are supposed to be neutral, he said. But neutrality depends on what data you feed it. If you train it mostly on suburban calls, that's who it learns to help best. So it's learning that my mother's zip code isn't worth rushing to? He sighed. Not intentionally, but effectively, yes. Monica frowned. That sounds like discrimination with a software license. He looked at her solemnly. You're not wrong. That night, Monica sat beside her mother's hospital bed, scrolling through pages of technical jargon and press releases. Every word, optimization, efficiency, predictive triage, seemed to mean the same thing: less humanity, more math. Evelyn reached for her daughter's hand. Don't wear yourself out trying to explain what they already know, baby. You can't fix a heart by speeding up the clock. Monica smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I can make sure they stop skipping people who don't scream. PulsePoint AI was built to save time, and it did. But it saved time unevenly. For some neighborhoods, the algorithm was a shortcut. For others, it was a dead end. It didn't see fear. It saw data. And when fear didn't sound loud enough, it just kept scrolling. Next, Monica discovers the truth hidden in the dispatch system's code, that her mother's neighborhood was flagged as low urgency zone, not because of call history, but because of zip code income averages. 2 days after Evelyn came home from the hospital, Monica drove to the county dispatch headquarters again, this time with a notebook, a voice recorder, and a look that said she wasn't leaving without answers. She'd scheduled a data transparency meeting with the city's EMS technology team. 3 men in gray shirts and 1 woman from the software company, PulsePoint, were already waiting in a small conference room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. Monica sat down, opened her notebook, and got right to the point. My mother's 911 call was flagged as non-emergency, she said. The logs say her zip code has a low urgency coefficient. What does that mean? One of the engineers cleared his throat. That's just a technical variable for location-based risk assessment. Risk of what? She asked. He hesitated. False alarms, mostly. Some areas have more prank calls or mistaken emergencies. The system learns patterns over time. Monica frowned. And how does it learn that? He gestured toward the screen on the wall. Machine learning models analyze call data, tone, follow-up results, and socioeconomic factors to optimize dispatch. Socioeconomic, she interrupted. You mean income? Well, he said cautiously, that's one of several features. It helps allocate limited resources more efficiently. She leaned forward, voice low. So my mother's address, her neighborhood, told your system her life wasn't urgent enough? No one spoke. The PulsePoint representative tried to smooth things over. Miss Carter, the algorithm doesn't discriminate. It's data-driven. It treats all information the same. Monica's eyes flashed. That's the problem. You treat unequal data equally and call it fairness. The room fell silent again. She pointed to the spreadsheet on the table. This shows South Hamilton, my mother's neighborhood, as Tier 3 response. What does that mean? The rep sighed. Tier 3 zones typically experience slower dispatch times due to lower resource density. Monica crossed her arms. Resource density? You mean fewer ambulances because fewer people there can afford to call one? The rep opened her mouth, but Monica continued. I work in healthcare. I know what words like efficiency and optimization really mean. They're just polite ways to say, we don't go there first. That evening, she showed Evelyn the printout. The page was filled with columns: population, average income, false alarm rate, response tier. At the bottom of the list was her zip code, marked in red. Evelyn squinted at the numbers. So we're at the bottom because we don't call enough? Monica shook her head. Because they think you call too much. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Well, I don't. I called once, and they didn't come. Monica laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hides exhaustion. Yeah, that's what they call irony. The next day, Monica received an anonymous email from a county employee. Subject line, "You were right." Attached was a confidential PowerPoint presentation titled Post-Point Geo-Triage Beta Evaluation. One slide showed a color-coded map of the city, divided into response priority zones. Under zone factors, the bullet points read, median income, call volume, false alarm probability based on zip, neighborhood safety index based on police data. At the bottom of the slide, one line stood out in bold. Model suggests deprioritizing lower income areas for faster average response time across city metrics. Monica whispered to herself, they're cooking the numbers to make the city look efficient. She brought the file to a local journalist who'd covered racial bias in policing. Within 48 hours, the story aired on the evening news. AI triage system flagged black neighborhoods as low urgency zones. The mayor called it a misunderstanding. The Postpoint Company released a statement claiming their data wasn't racially motivated. Monica rolled her eyes when she read it. They always say that, she muttered. They don't need to intend harm when they build it into the math. That night, Evelyn watched her daughter's face on TV as reporters played excerpts from the leaked presentation. Her neighbors began knocking on her door. People she'd known for decades, all telling similar stories. Miss Evelyn, my brother called 911 for his asthma last month. They came 40 minutes later. Same thing happened to my cousin. They said it was a low response zone. Evelyn listened, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. They built a system to measure trust, she said softly, but forgot to earn it. The next morning, city officials held a press conference. They promised a comprehensive audit of Postpoint. Monica watched it from home, shaking her head. They'll do what they always do, Mama. Study it until people forget. Evelyn smiled faintly. Then don't let them forget. Postpoint was designed to make emergency care faster. But in its search for speed, it learned shortcuts. And those shortcuts traced the same lines that history already drew. Evelyn Carter didn't just wait for an ambulance. She waited for acknowledgement that her calm voice and her zip code weren't reasons to be ignored. Next, Monica confronts the people behind Postpoint, forcing them to admit what the data really shows. That efficiency in healthcare, when left unchecked, becomes a form of quiet segregation. The following week, the county council called an emergency hearing, not about Evelyn Carter herself, but about the story that now had her name attached to it. The Carter incident, the local papers called it. The hearing was open to the public, and the seats were packed. Reporters, neighbors, clergy, nurses, and Evelyn herself, sitting quietly in the second row with a scarf over her shoulders and a calm expression that said she'd seen worse storms than this one. At the front, the Postpoint Company representative, Daniel Franks, adjusted his tie as the meeting began. Mr. Franks, said Councilwoman Rivera, your system marked multiple emergency calls from South Hamilton as low priority. Can you explain how that's possible? He smiled in the practiced way executives do. Councilwoman, Postpoint is designed to optimize limited emergency resources. It doesn't make decisions based on race or income. It simply follows data trends. Renee, sitting next to her mother, muttered under her breath, data trends? That's a fancy way to say stereotypes. When it was Monica's turn to speak, she stood up, steady and firm. My mother called 911 while she was having a heart attack, she said into the microphone. She did everything right, but because of her voice and her zip code, she was flagged as low priority. She held up a copy of the leaked presentation.
Right here, your own report says you deprioritized lower-income areas to make the city's numbers look better. Mr. Franks shifted uncomfortably. That was internal analysis, not operational policy. Monica stepped closer to the microphone. But the results were operational, weren't they? My mother waited 40 minutes, so did hundreds of others. You optimized response times by ignoring the people who needed them most. The room broke into murmurs. Evelyn watched quietly, her hand resting on her cane. A man in a gray suit stood next to Franks, the county's EMS director, Tom Baird. He tried to calm the tension. "Let's not vilify the technology," he said. "PulsePoint has saved lives, but we can't deny that it's imperfect." Monica turned toward him. "Imperfect isn't the word when people die waiting." Councilwoman Rivera leaned forward. "Mr. Baird, did you know the system was scoring neighborhoods this way?" He hesitated. "We were told the algorithm used neutral metrics. We didn't ask for the full data set." Rivera's tone sharpened. "So you let a company decide whose life mattered more and never thought to check the math?" The room fell silent again. After the hearing, the local news swarmed the hallway. One reporter asked Monica, "Do you think this was racism or just bad technology?" She stopped, turned to face the camera. "Both," she said, "because bad technology built on racist history isn't an accident, it's a continuation." The clip aired that night, played on every local channel. For the first time, people across the state began asking the same question. Who does technology really serve when it's built on the past? The next day, PulsePoint issued a statement. "We regret any harm caused by algorithmic imbalance. Our intent has always been to improve public safety." Evelyn read the statement in the paper and chuckled softly. "Algorithmic imbalance," she said. "They make it sound like a bad back." Monica smiled tiredly. "They're hoping the words will sound too complicated to blame." Soon after, Monica received a call from a lawyer working with a coalition of community advocates. They were preparing a class action lawsuit against the county and PulsePoint for negligence and discrimination. He asked, "Would your mother be willing to be the lead plaintiff?" Monica looked at Evelyn. Her mother thought for a moment, then said softly, "If it means nobody else has to wait 40 minutes for mercy, then yes." The case drew national attention. Activists compared PulsePoint's risk zones to digital redlining, the same discriminatory logic banks used decades earlier to deny black families home loans, now dressed up in data science. A headline in the New York Times read, "Emergency algorithms are quietly repeating the past." One paragraph quoted Monica directly. "Technology didn't invent bias, it just learned how to automate it." When Congress announced they would hold federal hearings on emergency AI systems, Evelyn's name appeared again, this time alongside a growing list of cases across the country. An elderly man in Detroit, a woman in Houston, a child in Baltimore, all flagged low urgency by the same system. Evelyn sighed when she saw the news. "Seems like the line for help is getting longer." Monica squeezed her hand. "Then we'll stand in it until they fix the door." A week later, the county quietly suspended PulsePoint's contract, promising to review future AI partnerships for bias compliance. In South Hamilton, neighbors cheered. But Evelyn didn't. She just said, "Suspending it's not the same as changing it." Monica smiled. "That's why we're not done yet." The people behind PulsePoint called it optimization. But optimization in the wrong hands became discrimination by convenience. Neat, measurable, and lethal. When technology starts deciding who gets saved, the line between innovation and injustice disappears.
Next, Monica receives leaked internal emails showing that Postpoint executives knew about the bias months before the first death and chose to hide the data to protect profits. The envelope came on a Thursday morning. No return address, just a postmark from D.C. Inside was a flash drive and a single note. They knew. Start with the folder marked Pilot Phase. Monica sat at her kitchen table, the blinds half drawn, her laptop humming softly. Evelyn was asleep in the next room. Her heart pounded as she opened the drive. Hundreds of files appeared. Emails, memos, reports. One stood out. Postpoint, Pilot Evaluation Summary. She clicked. On the first page, a sentence leapt out. Demographic disparities in triage scoring observed in early testing. Recommend postponing public disclosure until communications review. She whispered, they saw it and buried it. Another document was worse, an internal memo from 6 months before the system went live. From Director of Model Operations to CEO, Product Team. We've confirmed significant bias in speech tone analysis. Older Black and Southern accented callers are scored an average of 30% lower for distress. Fix requires retraining the model. Estimated delay, 8 weeks. The CEO's response came a few lines below. Too costly to delay. Proceed as scheduled. Will frame as isolated anomalies in post-launch audits. Monica covered her mouth. Isolated anomalies, she whispered. That's what they called my mother. She called her friend from the local newspaper, the same reporter who'd covered Evelyn's story. Meet me in an hour, Monica said. I have proof. At the diner downtown, she slid the printouts across the table. The reporter scanned the lines, eyes widening. This isn't negligence, she said quietly. This is corporate malpractice. Monica nodded. They didn't just know, they profited from it. Every skipped neighborhood made their numbers look better. The reporter leaned in. Can I publish this? Not yet, Monica said. Let me tell Mama first. That evening, Monica sat beside her mother on the porch. Cicadas hummed in the humid Georgia air. They knew, Mama, she said softly, before it ever happened. The people who made that system, they knew it didn't understand voices like yours. Evelyn looked out across the street, her eyes calm but tired. I figured as much. Folks been misunderstanding my voice my whole life. Monica smiled sadly. I just didn't think a computer could do it too. Evelyn chuckled lightly. Computers learn from people, baby, and people been biased for a long time. The story broke the next week. Front page headline in the Washington Post. Leaked memos show company ignored bias warnings in 911 AI. Subheading. Executives chose speed over safety, data over dignity. Cable news picked it up. One anchor read directly from the leaked memo. Too costly to delay. Proceed as scheduled. She looked up at the camera and said, that decision cost lives. Congress demanded a formal inquiry. PulsePoint stock plummeted overnight. The CEO released a carefully worded apology. We regret any unintentional harm caused by unforeseen algorithmic discrepancies. Evelyn read it aloud from her kitchen table and shook her head. Baby, they still can't say the word wrong. Monica laughed under her breath. Guess it's not in their vocabulary model. In the weeks that followed, more whistleblowers came forward. A former employee testified anonymously. We were told not to mention demographic imbalance during presentations. Leadership said it might distract from the success narrative. Another wrote, we flagged racial tone variance repeatedly. They said fixing it wasn't part of the contract. Monica printed every document and stacked them in a binder labeled The Record That Heard Nothing. At a press conference downtown, surrounded by advocates and families of other victims, Monica stood at the podium. Her voice was calm, deliberate, her mother's voice. They told us the system was colorblind, she said.
But colorblind isn't the same as seeing clearly. When you erase people's differences, you erase their truth. And when a machine can't tell one voice from another, it shouldn't decide who lives or dies. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. One asked, "Miss Carter, what do you want to happen next?" Monica didn't hesitate. Accountability. If they can audit us for our bills, our insurance, our credit, they can audit their code for justice. Later that night, Evelyn watched the press conference replay on TV. Her eyes shimmered with pride. "She's got my tone," she said softly, calm but sharp enough to cut. The paper trail revealed what the company hoped would stay buried, a record of decisions where profits outweighed people. They didn't program cruelty, they programmed convenience. And in doing so, they proved that bias isn't always born from hate. Sometimes it's built from hurry. Next, communities across the nation unite under one banner, demanding a new law, the Emergency Equity Act, to ensure every call from every neighborhood is heard and answered. By the time Monica's story hit national television, people across the country began sharing their own. The comment sections, talk shows, even church bulletins filled with familiar words. We called for help. Nobody came. It wasn't just South Hamilton. It was Detroit. It was Jackson. It was Baltimore. It was anywhere a certain zip code made sirens move slower. In Chicago, a 68-year-old man named Harold Green had a stroke while home alone. His granddaughter called 911 twice. An ambulance arrived 53 minutes later. By then, Harold couldn't speak. In Houston, a single mother watched her toddler choke on a grape. Her call was flagged as moderate distress. The paramedics arrived after another system recalibrated. And in St. Louis, a woman who lived 3 blocks from a major hospital died of an asthma attack while the dispatch software rerouted responders to a higher priority zone downtown. The stories blurred together, same words, different names. Each one a little more proof that Evelyn Carter's case wasn't an outlier. It was a mirror. The hashtag "still waiting" came roaring back, this time with sirens in the background of the videos. Some showed people holding up their phones, recording their calls, their timers running. Others showed empty streets, flashing lights in the distance that never turned down their block. A preacher in Memphis said it best during a Sunday sermon broadcast live on Facebook. "Once upon a time, they told us to stay calm. Now our calm is being used as proof that we don't need help." The clip went viral. Monica began organizing a coalition of families who'd experienced the same failures. They called themselves Voices of the Unanswered. They held meetings in church basements and public libraries, printing out pages of 911 transcripts and response logs. In one session, an older woman with a soft Louisiana drawl raised her hand. "They said my neighborhood's calls had too many false alarms," she said. "But the only false thing was their promise to show up." Another man spoke up, voice shaking. "My wife waited on the porch till the pain stopped. By the time they came, it was too late to help her, but right on time to write a report." Monica wrote every word down. Evelyn, sitting quietly in the back, whispered to the woman next to her, "All these people telling the same story, that means it's not coincidence, it's design." The coalition gathered signatures for a federal investigation. Within weeks, more than 100,000 people had signed the petition demanding oversight of AI-driven emergency systems. Lawmakers could no longer look away. Public pressure mounted until a bipartisan congressional committee was formed, the same one that would later write the Emergency Equity Act. The first line of the committee report read, "Technology built to save lives must not decide whose lives are worth saving." News crews started visiting Evelyn's home. She was on the evening broadcast again, sitting on her porch in her favorite peach dress, speaking softly but firmly.
They told me to stay calm, she said, and I did. But calm doesn't mean safe. Sometimes it just means we've been taught not to expect much. Her words echoed across living rooms nationwide. A talk show host replayed the clip and said, "When she says that, you can feel 100 years of waiting behind it." In the weeks that followed, counties began suspending their contracts with Postpoint. New York, Georgia, Mississippi. One after another, they cited unacceptable disparities in dispatch patterns. The company issued a final press statement. "We acknowledge the need for further fairness calibration." Evelyn read it in the newspaper and chuckled. "Fairness calibration," she said. "Lord, they talk about justice like it's a thermostat." Monica smiled. "They'll learn, Mama. We're turning up the heat." By fall, the Carter incident had sparked a full-blown movement. University students held rallies with signs that read, "Emergency means everyone. Don't code me out. Justice has no zip code." Church choirs sang protest hymns on courthouse steps. One of them rewrote an old spiritual. "Somebody call the ambulance for the ones they didn't see. We've been waiting on deliverance. Now deliverance waits on me." Evelyn smiled when she saw the video. "They're singing us forward, baby." Monica knew the next step had to be bigger. The stories were too many, too heartbreaking to ignore. She reached out to civil rights lawyers, healthcare experts, and senators willing to listen. Within months, they drafted a bill, a promise carved into paper, the Emergency Equity Act. The first clause bore her mother's name, the Carter Clause. Every 911 call shall be verified by human oversight. No algorithm shall assign urgency by geography, tone, or income. It was never just one call. It was a system tuned to efficiency, deaf to empathy, a machine that learned silence faster than compassion. Evelyn Carter didn't set out to change the world. She just wanted someone to answer. Next, Monica testifies before Congress, turning grief into legislation and teaching the country that fairness isn't a feature you can download. It's a responsibility you must uphold. The Capitol hearing room smelled faintly of coffee and nerves. Rows of cameras lined the walls, journalists whispering into microphones as senators took their seats. On the table in front of them lay a stack of reports, each one stamped with the same bold title, the Emergency Equity Act, Public Testimony. In the second row sat Evelyn Carter, her soft hands folded neatly in her lap, her Sunday scarf perfectly tied. Beside her, Monica flipped through her notes, printed, underlined, rehearsed, but still trembling slightly. A staffer whispered, "You're up next." Monica took a deep breath, glanced back at her mother, and walked to the microphone. "Good morning, Senators," she began, voice steady but warm. "My name is Monica Carter. I'm here because my mother, Evelyn Carter, did what we all teach our loved ones to do in an emergency. She called for help." She paused, letting the silence settle. And the system told her to wait. You could hear the air conditioning hum. The computer didn't hear fear in her voice, it heard calm. And because her voice came from a certain neighborhood, it decided her pain could wait. That's not efficiency, that's inequality with code attached. Senator Andrews, an older man with a slow Southern drawl, leaned forward. "Miss Carter, what exactly went wrong?" Monica nodded. "It wasn't one mistake, sir. It was hundreds built into the design. Postpoint's system used zip codes and tone of voice to judge urgency. That meant if you were poor, old, or sounded calm, the computer assumed you were fine." She opened a folder and held up a chart. "These are internal emails. They knew about it and launched anyway." Gasps filled the room. Later, a doctor from Detroit testified. He confirmed that several patients in low-income areas died waiting for ambulances that were reallocated to faster scoring districts. Then came a data scientist. He explained that neutral algorithms often become biased because they reflect the world that trained them. AI learns from our history, he said, and history isn't neutral. Finally, the committee chair turned back to Monica. What would you have us do? Monica didn't hesitate. Make humanity non-optional, she said. Require human review on every automated dispatch decision. Mandate transparency so families can see how their calls were scored. And most of all, make sure no company ever hide behind the phrase algorithmic discrepancy again. The senators scribbled notes. One nodded quietly. When the final vote came 2 weeks later, the result was unanimous. The Emergency Equity Act passed both houses of Congress with overwhelming support. The president signed it into law on a clear spring morning, with Evelyn and Monica standing beside him.
He smiled at Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "because of you, every voice in this country, no matter where it calls from, will be heard." Evelyn's lips trembled slightly as she smiled. "Well, Mr. President, it's about time." The crowd laughed softly, then applauded. The Carter Clause became the centerpiece of the new law. No automated emergency system shall classify urgency without human oversight. No geographic, racial, or economic factor shall influence response priority. Every city using PulsePoint or similar technology was required to retrain their AI models, this time using diverse voices, real-world stress patterns, and community oversight boards. Dispatchers were retrained too. They were taught to listen again, really listen. News stations ran headlines across the nation. Justice on the line, the Carter Clause signed into law. AI reform begins with a grandmother's 911 call. At the South Hamilton Fire and Rescue Building, a new banner hung above the dispatch center. The Carter Clause, because every call deserves an answer. And inside, a voice recording played on loop for new trainees, Evelyn's own words. "If you ever hear calm, don't assume safety. Sometimes calm is the sound of survival." Monica sat beside her mother on the porch that evening, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. "They did it, Mama," she said. "It's law now." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Good. Maybe next time somebody's mother won't have to wait." "You changed the system," Monica whispered. Evelyn smiled. "No, baby, we just made it see people again." The following month, a new pilot system launched nationwide, this time called Human First Dispatch. The company's tagline, "Technology that listens like a person." At its ribbon-cutting ceremony, Evelyn's name was engraved on a bronze plaque. In honor of Evelyn Carter, whose calm voice taught a nation how to listen. The Carter Clause didn't erase bias, it exposed it. It didn't fix every system, but it forced the country to admit that progress isn't about faster answers. It's about fair ones. Evelyn Carter didn't just survive an emergency. She redefined what an emergency means. That help isn't real if it doesn't reach everyone. Next, Evelyn returns to her community center, where she helps seniors learn how to protect themselves in the digital age, teaching them that every call, every click, and every data point has a story behind it. 6 months after the Emergency Equity Act became law, the sound of sirens in South Hamilton felt different. Not louder, just more certain. When someone called for help now, they came. That change started with one quiet woman who had learned how to wait and then decided waiting wasn't enough. The community center was packed that Saturday afternoon. Rows of chairs filled the main hall, fans spinning overhead, the smell of pound cake drifting in from the kitchen. At the front stood Evelyn Carter, cane in hand, microphone set low to her height. Behind her hung a new banner in soft teal and gold. The Carter Clause, because every call deserves an answer. She looked out at the faces,
Seniors, students, paramedics, dispatchers, all listening. "I used to think being patient was a good thing," she began. The crowd chuckled softly. "But sometimes patience turns into permission, and we start letting systems forget us." Her voice was steady, full of grace and gravity. "Well, we stopped letting them forget, didn't we?" The audience nodded, clapped. A young 911 trainee raised her hand. "Mrs. Carter," she said shyly, "your story's part of our training now. We're told to remember that calm doesn't always mean safe." Evelyn smiled. "I'm glad to hear that, baby. You know, I wasn't calm because I wasn't scared. I was calm because I was raised to hold myself together until help came. But the world forgot how to hear that kind of calm." The trainee wiped her eyes. "Not anymore, ma'am." After the talk, Monica helped her mother to a seat near the window. Outside, an ambulance rolled by, its siren clear and strong. Evelyn watched it for a moment and whispered, "That sound used to scare me. Now it makes me feel safe again." Monica smiled. "It's the sound of the system working for everybody now." Her mother nodded. "Took a long road to get here." Across the country, dispatch centers displayed a small sign on every console. "The Carter Rule, listen twice." It became a simple but powerful standard, one that reminded every operator that human lives weren't numbers in a queue. Hospitals reported shorter disparities in response times between poor and wealthy neighborhoods. National data showed a 60% drop in low-urgency misclassifications. For once, the numbers told a good story. A few months later, Evelyn was invited to Washington for a ceremony at the National EMS Memorial. The president spoke briefly, then turned the podium to her. She leaned in, her voice slow and deliberate. "I didn't set out to make laws," she said. "I just wanted to be heard. But when you wait long enough for help, you learn something, that silence isn't peace. It's just a pause before the truth shows up." The crowd stood, applauding. Camera lights flashed, but Evelyn kept her gaze steady, humble. Back home, her porch became something of a local landmark. High school students doing research would stop by to ask questions. Paramedics came to thank her. Some just wanted to sit with her, to listen. She'd always pour them a glass of sweet tea, then tell them the same thing. "You can fix a system all you want, but if people forget how to care, it'll break again." That winter, a snowstorm hit Atlanta. Dispatch lines flooded with calls. This time, no neighborhood went unserved. Every call, from gated suburbs to old brick apartments, was answered. Evelyn sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker through the snow. Somewhere out there, a siren wailed in the distance, steady and sure. She whispered, "Now that's what equality sounds like." The next morning, Monica found her mother's notebook open on the table. At the top of the page, Evelyn had written in her neat cursive handwriting, "Fairness isn't loud, it just needs to be certain." Beneath it, a single line, "Every call deserves an answer, no matter where it comes from." Evelyn Carter didn't change the world by shouting. She changed it by making silence mean something again. Her calm became a signal. Her patience became policy. Her voice became a promise. Now, across America, when someone calls for help, no matter how they sound, where they live, or how much money they have, an ambulance comes. Because one woman taught the nation that listening is the first act of care. The Carter Clause, 2036, because every call deserves an answer. If this story moved you, share it. Someone you love might still be waiting for their call to be answered. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories, When Data Meets Dignity, for more true stories about courage, justice, and the people teaching technology how to care.